Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and I am the host of the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, as well as the blackbraziltoday.com blog, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. So tonight, I want to take another step into this topic that has long fascinated me. One of the things that has most attracted me to looking at race, situations that have to do with race or color in Brazil is how things play out in Brazil versus what many of us know of how these things play out in the United States, and finding these similarities, contrasts, and differences. Sometimes you find the exact same situation, sometimes they're completely different. When I started going to Brazil in the year 2000, I didn't want to just come to the conclusion that everything was exactly the same there. And it didn't take long for me to realize how true that was. Like, yeah, there are many similarities that you can find there. Black Brazilians and Black Americans can share numerous experiences historically with how the two populations have been treated by what we'll call just the mainstream societies of both countries. But then there's just areas of just clear differences. You can't say that Brazil ever actually had like a legally sanctioned form of racial segregation, like whites only here, blacks only there. But social scientists have argued that countries in Latin America or in Brazil specifically, it never really needed that, because the way the societies were structured, it would still leave black people on the bottom of the society, particularly the darker skinned black people. So, for many years, for decades, it's been an argument of elites that says, look, we never had racialized segregation here. So it's you Americans who are the true racist. But after my 22-year journey into Brazil, my question is, it's not so much, which country is more racist, or if one country is racist and another one is not. After comparing these things for so long in so many different aspects of, racial inequality in both countries, I came to a more important question, which is, which country was more effective in keeping Black people in their place, so to speak? And if you just ask that simple question, then it's hands down, Brazil has been more successful in keeping Black people in their place. If what I mean by in their place is that it's clear if you just read some of the comments that people make online, social networks, or online forums or whatever. It's clear that Brazilian society sees that people of clear, visible African ancestry belong on the bottom. I've seen it over and over again. It's like people had a problem when they see Black people like riding on a plane. People make an issue when they see Black people driving better cars than them. People see an issue when they'll see, for example, the maid's daughter, and it's stereotypically believed that it's supposed to be a Black woman who's supposed to be taking care of middle-class families, middle-class, mostly white families. So this was some years ago. I remember, like, this was coming out. People just had this question, like, oh my God, how can the maid's daughter be going to the same university as my daughter? She doesn't belong here. So this is something that you see over and over. So the parallels are pretty striking, but then there are differences that cannot be ignored. And as much as I have had this debate over the years, I have to respect that it is true. Brazil is not exactly like the United States, even if we're just looking at the race aspect. I find that you find pockets of poverty throughout Brazil, and you'll just see poor whites and poor blacks living together. Whereas in the United States, you'll find a lot of areas where, that's the poor black section there. And then you got to go on the other side of the tracks. You'll find, like, the poor white section. So even among the poor, you'll have this segregation in the United States. So even though you still see this kind of idea that white Brazilians or people who are close to the white phenotype feel themselves a little bit superior, if not, it just feel themselves much more superior than people who are more clearly black. The everyday interactions will still be like, buddy buddy in some ways. And for many years, this people having families across race and color lines, and this camaraderie that people have, it kind of masks the hidden problem that a lot of Brazilians to this day still don't want to deal with. Like, no, we don't have that problem here. I just kind of have to ignore that. I remember a few months ago, I ran into some people here in Michigan, and every now and then, I don't like bringing up the race topic with Brazilians outside of Brazil or in Brazil, particularly the whiter Brazilians, because it's always a thing of denial. You get to talking to more black Brazilians and you get a more clear perspective um, of how they feel. Because for years, the white narrative has always dominated in Brazil, where we don't have this race issue, but you talk to the black Brazilians and it's a whole different, a whole different topic. It's a whole different opinion. So without exploring all of that, I want to stay focused on this topic that I'm going to approach today, because, for many years before I started traveling to Brazil, I was hearing about this issue of single black women in the United States and the difficulty they were having finding mates, particularly women as they started growing up we'll say the social ladder, getting more education, more high paying jobs, and they're looking for black men on their level. And it's not quite panning out. And people are asking why. So then when I started going to Brazil, um, in reality, it took a couple of years before I realized that this issue was something that was it was playing out in its own way in Brazil also. Uh, Even though I came across this topic a few times in the first decade, this question of single black women really started to blow up sometime. Like I said, I discovered it maybe, if we're going to just talk about online comments, I could go back to maybe 2000, I don't know, sometime between 2004 or 2008. But then it really started to take shape online in like 2012 and 13, where it just seems like tens of thousands of black women were commenting on this online, to the point like, wow, this really is an issue. Black Brazilian women were just asking, why do so many men just pass us up? Black men and white men were passing them up. And this parcel of the population was having more difficulty finding, securing long-term relationships, getting married. And, it was bearing out in the statistics. So there's a lot to say about this. So I'm going to just start to get into this piece that I put out in 2014. Yeah, I know this article is from 8 years ago, but so in so many ways, these articles that I posted even 5 to 10 years ago are still discussions that are going on right now. And for people who are not familiar with how this topic plays out in Brazil, this might be intriguing, for people to understand. It's not just a question that affects black women in the United States, right? So this issue, this particular piece is called The Color of Love. While there are many single women in Brazil, why are most single women black? So this is a picture from a popular play that was playing in Sao Paulo for a while. It was called Engravidei, Pari, Cavalos e Aprendi a Voar Sem Asas. I'll get into the translation a little bit later, but wish I could have seen this play, because it seems like just the way it's describing the description of the play is something that is definitely something I would be interested in seeing. But let me get into this piece, and I'll be talking about this along the way. So Brazil is a country that is known globally for having some of the world's most beautiful women. This site is not a place for internet dating, but the various social network pages of the site consistently receives messages from men all over the world saying they love Brazilian women, that their goal is to marry a Brazilian woman, or asking how they can meet a Brazilian woman. I've gotten a lot of these type of questions over the years. One thing I want to point out, because there's an article that I just put up recently, like within the last month and a half, 2 months, where the question was, why do so many men outside of Brazil seem to see Brazilian women as sex objects? And one of the first things that they were discussing in this article, that particular piece that I put up, was how many Brazilian women have this experience of being outside of Brazil and having just men in other countries saying, "Oh, I love Brazilian women." Like, what pops up in their mind when the image, when the words Brazilian woman pops in, is presented to them, right? You have to check out that video because there's some intriguing thoughts there. Just one woman's interpretation, because in reality, you get a lot of Brazilian women asking this question as they feel like in some ways they're being objectified just because they're Brazilian. There's a certain stereotype that people have about Brazilian women. So, um, to be sure, Brazilian women come in all skin tones, shapes, and sizes with various hair textures and eye colors. The image that comes to mind when a man outside of Brazil thinks a Brazilian woman seems to be borderline perfection. But what is it that a man, particularly a Brazilian man, seeks when he decides to settle down with a brasileira? Well, according to statistics, the woman that least manages to make it to the altar is the black woman, the mulher negra, mulher preta, which both mean black woman in Portuguese. In past articles, Black Women of Brazil, which was what the title of this blog was before it became Black Brazil Today, has approached the issue of the difficulty of Black women entering and maintaining long term relationships and even delved into the topic of interracial relationships. Well, as we already knew, this blog is not the only place where the state of the Black woman in life and relationships is being discussed. The issue is also being approached in books and even on stage. So, several pieces that I could get into here. This one in particular here, where I was referring to the difficulty of Black women entering and maintaining long term relationships. That's what this article is actually entitled. Uh, the difficulty of Black women maintaining long term relationships and getting married. And a lot of these women are telling their stories. They're talking about the difficulty they find as they climb the social ladder, as they attain more education, more money, how they feel ignored by Black men. They open up their options to date white men. Very intriguing story here. I forget what year this is from, 2013, actually. One day I'm going to feature this particular article. This is a book that came out. I forget what year, but most of the studies where they're talking about what's called the solidão da mulher negra, the solitude of the loneliness of the Black woman, a lot of it is based on this book called Vida a Regra by Claudete Alves. It just means, has it become the rule? Successful Black man, white woman. All right. So let me get back into the piece and just stay focused on this. So, the color of love, effective everyday Black women or everyday Black woman, from the comprehension of loneliness to empowerment. This particular piece is by Maite Freitas, and there's two particular plays that were playing out in 2013 and 2014, and a lot of because today is starting to Brazil's film industry is starting to change, where you get more leading roles for Black Brazilians. But one thing that I noticed in the last decade was that more and more Black Afro-Brazilian theater groups were taking their stories to the stage, because it was almost impossible to get Black Brazilian stories with majority Black cast, Black directors, Black leading men, Black leading women in movies or even television series. So they started taking the story to the stage. So, every now and then they say that there are a lot of single women. What is not said is that most single women in Brazil are Black. According to the 2010 census, 52.89% of Black women are unmarried, compared to 24.88 married Black women and 2.6% divorcees. The numbers are scary, but living this statistic every day and knowing that this is a historical legacy is much worse. Again, the book by Claudete Alves, Did It Become the Rule? Author of the book, Vida Regra, Did It Become the Rule? Researcher and former counselor and chairman of SIDEN, Claudete Alves, what is the Association of Childhood Education, Claudete Alves. She used to be I think she was a city councilwoman in the city of Sao Paulo, formerly. So Alves explains, the Black woman faces loneliness independent of social stratum. This is not an exception, it is the rule, a historical symptom that indicates a real behavior. Black women in their majority do not have the experience of love. This is another book, Mulher Negra, Afetividade e Solidão, Black Women, Affectivity and Loneliness by Ana Cláudia Lemos Pacheco. right? Both of these books by Claudetchi and by Ana Claudia are very popular books. They became like a rallying cry for a lot of Black women in like the second part of the we'll say the starting of the second decade in the 21st century. You just constantly find these two particular books being cited in other academic studies talking about this problem with Black women finding long-term relationships. In the same vein, the researcher Ana Claudio Lemos Pacheco, author of the recently released, I've translated it as Black Women, Affectivity and Loneliness, reiterates loneliness has its origin in the family structure. What do single Black women have in common? Social origins and family. They are born and grow up with racism and sexism as crossed systems of oppression. Many have never experienced a fixed, lasting, and healthy relationship. The Black woman, besides being alone, is the greatest victim of domestic violence. Okay, so this is one of the this is a picture of one of those plays that I mentioned earlier. It's called Sangoma by the what is it? CIA in Brazil means company. So it's the Capulana de Arte Negra, Capulana of Black Art. In line with this debate, two Black collectives of Sao Paulo theater, this again, the CIA Capulana de Arte Negra and Os Crespos, mounted the plays Sangoma and Engravidei Pari Cavalos e Aprendi a Voar Sem Asas, which basically means I got pregnant, I gave birth to horses, and learned to fly without wings. For actor Sidney Santiago of Os Crespos, dealing with the subject on stage makes of theater a space for meeting, debate, and healing. Art has its duty of the present to insert thematic faces to our Black sociability and think that our emotional health is as all other insertions. Now, just one other thing: when you say the name of this theater group is called Os Crespos, it's a it's a Black theater group, Afro-Brazilian theater group, and Os Crespos can basically be translated as like the nappy heads, right? Crespo is how you define kinky curly hair in Brazil. This is a scene from that particular play. The dramaturgy written by the researcher Cidinha Silva have in common the use of real stories and the experience of the actresses that in these pieces give voice to lonely Black women. Sangoma and Pari Cavalos have in common abandonment and loneliness through which Black women go through, and the search for love as a way of healing, especially in healing themselves as they learn to love themselves more, explains Cidinha. The text, made from the personal stories of the actresses, struck a nerve with the public. Many men are bothered by the spectacle. Others recognize the story of their mothers, grandmothers. I can't not talk about our experiences. Loneliness, silence, the difficulty of recognizing when love comes, as the experience of love and liking ourselves was already taken away from us, says the actress and dancer Deborah Marçal of the CIA, basically the Capulana's company. Like I said, one of the two theater groups featured in this piece. The dream of Prince Charming, a wedding veil and wreath instilled in the female unconscious over the centuries, is not part of the reality of the Black woman. Educator and actress Adriana Paixão explains. She's also part of that theater group. We follow post models. Most Black women don't experience and have never experienced this Western model of relationships. Discussing other freedoms, other themes, we don't even look at the Black woman. This is a chart, one of those pie charts, just talking about the civil state of Black women in Brazil. 53% being single, 10% is that's non-applicable, 25% are married, 8% are divorced, or rather widows, and then 3% are divorced. Then you see like this 1% might be legally separated. Where are we here?